When the Admiral walked into the hall filled with veterans, he immediately noticed the elderly man standing quietly near the back, hands folded behind him, eyes steady and calm as if watching memories rather than people. The Admiral approached him with genuine respect because something about the old veteran's posture, the way he carried himself, showed a lifetime of discipline and battles no one else in the room could fully understand. When the Admiral stopped in front of him, everyone around slowly quieted, curious about why such a high-ranking officer would single out one old man among many. With a slight nod and a respectful tone, the Admiral asked the question that had been on his mind the entire day. "Sir, what was your call sign?" For a moment, the old veteran didn't respond, almost as if he had drifted back into a different time, a different battlefield. His eyes narrowed slightly, not out of anger, but out of the kind of deep reflection only those who live through impossible situations ever experience. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but carried a weight that made everyone around lean closer. "They called me Ghost 5, he said, and the room fell completely silent. The Admiral raised an eyebrow because Ghost 5 wasn't just a call sign. It was a legend whispered in military circles. Some said Ghost 5 was a pilot who survived missions no one else could. Others claimed he was a ground operative who vanished behind enemy lines and always returned without a scratch. But no one really knew the truth, and the man himself had never spoken publicly about it. The Admiral then asked, "Why Ghost 5? The old veteran took a deep breath and said that it all began during one of the most dangerous operations his team had ever faced. They were assigned to infiltrate an area so heavily guarded that even planning the mission felt like suicide. Out of 6 men, only 5 made it deep into the enemy territory because their 6th member, a young soldier named Harris, was shot during insertion. That moment stayed with him forever. He said that the team barely had time to process the loss because the mission had to continue, and every step they took felt like walking through shadows. They moved silently, communicated through gestures, and every breath felt like it could be their last." The veteran explained that his job was to guide the team through unfamiliar terrain in pitch darkness, with enemy patrols so close they could hear their radios crackling. But he had a strange sense, almost an instinct, for knowing where danger was before anyone else could see it. Several times he led the team around traps, ambushes, and snipers that would have taken them all out. His teammates started jokingly saying he moved like a ghost, appearing and disappearing without sound. But the name became serious when they successfully completed the mission and returned, carrying critical intel that saved hundreds of soldiers. The briefing officers were shocked that all 5 remaining members survived because the mission was deemed nearly impossible. When reports came in about how he avoided enemy encounters in ways no one could explain, someone wrote Ghost next to his name in the file. Later, during a radio transmission, a commanding officer called him Ghost 5, referring to the 5 men who came back alive under his guidance. The title stuck. But the veteran told the Admiral the real meaning behind it wasn't about being a hero. He said he never forgot that they started as 6 men, not 5, and the call sign Ghost 5 always reminded him of the one who didn't make it, Harris. To him, Ghost 5 wasn't a badge of honor. It was a tribute. The Admiral listened carefully, noticing the way the veteran's voice softened whenever he spoke of his team. The Admiral then asked what happened after that mission. The veteran explained that Ghost 5 became the unofficial name for every operation he led afterward. His reputation wasn't built on bravado, but on survival, not his own, but the survival of the men he was responsible for. If he led a mission, others felt safer. During one winter operation, his team was trapped in a blizzard behind enemy lines with no radio contact, no backup, and dwindling supplies. Temperatures dropped below freezing, and several soldiers began losing hope. Ghost 5, as he was known by then, kept moving, scouting ahead in the whiteout conditions, sometimes disappearing for hours only to return with a safe route or hidden shelter he somehow found. No one understood how he navigated through the storm, but they followed him because they trusted him with their lives. He carried injured men on his back for miles, refused to sleep, and stayed awake listening for distant engines or enemy footsteps, even when the storm blocked all sound. When they finally reached friendly territory after days of freezing hell, the officers who debriefed them said the rescue was impossible, yet Ghost 5 made it happen. But the veteran shook his head while recounting the story, saying he didn't save them. They saved each other. He said that people often believe war is won by strategy, weapons, and orders. But the truth is that survival depends on the bond between those fighting side by side. The Admiral asked him if he ever feared dying during those missions. The veteran smiled faintly and said fear was always there, but he learned that fear isn't something to be ashamed of. It's a reminder that you still have something worth living for. Then the veteran shared a story the Admiral had never heard, the mission that truly defined Ghost 5. It was deep in a hostile region where his team was sent to extract a captured officer. The enemy had set traps everywhere, and the chances of getting out alive were almost zero. During the operation, the team came under heavy fire. The veteran told everyone to stay down while he crawled through mud, debris, and shattered buildings to get a view of the enemy position. He managed to call in a diversion strike at the perfect moment, allowing his team to reach the captive officer. But when they tried to retreat, they were cornered. The veteran realized the only way to escape was to lure the enemy in a different direction, alone. Without hesitation, he ran into another alley, shouting, drawing fire toward himself. For several minutes, gunshots echoed as he dodged behind walls and wreckage, confusing the enemy long enough for his team to get to safety. When the Admiral asked how he survived that, the veteran chuckled and said luck, training, and maybe something more. His team later said they saw him slipping through smoke and rubble like he was invisible, hence the Ghost nickname. When he reunited with them, bruised, bleeding, but alive, they shouted, "Ghost 5 lives," and hugged him like a brother returning from the dead. As the story ended, the entire hall was silent. The Admiral looked at him with deep admiration and said, "You weren't just a soldier. You were a legend." But the veteran shook his head gently and replied, "No, sir. Legends are stories. I was just someone trying to keep his brothers alive." The Admiral then saluted him, not as a superior officer salutes a subordinate, but as a warrior salutes another warrior. The room filled with emotion, and even the younger soldiers felt a sense of reverence. Ghost 5 had spoken, and everyone who heard him would carry his story forever. Asterisk. After the hall settled again, the Admiral pulled a chair and sat directly across from the old veteran, sensing that there was still much more behind the call sign Ghost 5 than anyone in the room had ever heard. The veteran adjusted his posture slightly, the subtle stiffness in his shoulders revealing the hidden reminders of old injuries, but his eyes remained sharp. The Admiral leaned forward and said, "If you don't mind, sir, I would like to know what happened after that mission. Men like you don't just disappear from the records." The veteran gave a faint smile, one touched with a mixture of nostalgia and sorrow. He said that after the extraction mission, his superiors wanted him to train a new generation of soldiers. They wanted him to teach others how to think in darkness, how to feel danger before seeing it, how to move with purpose even when surrounded. But the veteran said the hardest part was not the training, but learning to lead young men who reminded him of the friends he had lost. He said every new recruit carried an echo of someone he once knew. Harris, the one who never came back. Miller, who used to joke even in gunfire. Jacobs, who always volunteered for the riskiest tasks. And Taylor, whose steady hands saved countless lives. When he stood in front of trainees, he didn't see students. He saw the ghosts of his past. But instead of letting those memories break him, he used them as lessons. He told the young soldiers not to fight like heroes, because heroes die young. He told them to fight smart, fight together, and never let ego lead them into danger. The Admiral listened intently as the veteran described how he built the training program like no other. While most instructors taught tactics, he taught instinct. They trained at night, often in forests with no lights, no compasses, and no sound except wind and leaves. The soldiers learned to feel terrain under their boots, to sense when something was wrong, to recognize patterns in silence. Many thought he was pushing them too hard, but later, those same men said his training saved their lives. The veteran said the military asked him to return to active missions countless times, but he refused until the day he received a classified message about an operation so dangerous that even the best commanders hesitated to approve it. An elite team had disappeared behind enemy lines during reconnaissance. They were alive but trapped, and no one could reach them because the area was considered a dead zone. The briefing officer told him, "We need Ghost 5. You're the only one who can guide a rescue team in and out before the enemy realizes what happened." The veteran hesitated, not out of fear, but because he knew the cost of stepping back into that world. But when he looked over the mission details, he saw that one of the missing soldiers was a young man he had trained personally. A soldier who once said, "Sir, if I'm ever in trouble, I hope you come get me." With that memory echoing in his mind, he agreed to lead the operation. The Admiral leaned back slightly, as if preparing himself for another intense story. The veteran said the rescue mission began under the cover of darkness, deep in the mountains where enemy camps were scattered like hidden traps. The terrain was brutal, narrow cliffs, unstable rocks, and freezing winds that whipped against their faces. The rescue team followed him without question, trusting every step he took. He remembered the way the moonlight flickered across the valleys, barely enough to see, but more than enough for him to read the landscape. Several times he stopped abruptly, raising his hand, and the team froze. Moments later, an enemy patrol would walk by, completely unaware of their presence. The veteran said that during one part of the journey, they crawled through a narrow ravine where echoes could give away their location. Every movement had to be silent. One soldier slipped on loose gravel, and before the sound could travel, the veteran lunged and pressed the soldier against the wall, covering his gear to stop the clinking noise. "Little things," he said, "little mistakes kill missions." When they finally reached the abandoned structure where the missing team was hiding, the veteran called out softly in a coded whisper, a sound he used during training sessions. The soldier he had personally trained responded with the same pattern. When they found the missing team, they were exhausted, dehydrated, and nearly out of ammunition. But their spirits lifted the moment they recognized Ghost 5. The veteran said what happened next was the hardest part, getting out. The extraction was always more dangerous than infiltration because now the enemy had started picking up signals. The veteran split the rescue group into 2 smaller units to reduce noise and visibility. He led the first group through a steep ridge, moving quickly but carefully. The second group followed a few minutes behind. But halfway through the escape route, they encountered a massive problem, a newly placed enemy checkpoint that wasn't there during infiltration. The team froze, realizing they had limited choices. The veteran's mind raced. He studied the movement of the guards, the timing of their rotations, the sound of their radios. With quick assessment, he came up with a plan that seemed impossible. They would slip through a small drainage tunnel beneath the checkpoint, barely large enough for a grown man. The tunnel was filled with muddy water, debris, and thick darkness. But the veteran went in first, crawling, pushing branches and rocks aside. He said that those moments inside the cramped tunnel felt endless, and he could hear the pounding heartbeat of the soldier behind him who whispered, "Sir, are we going to make it?" And he answered, "If I stop, push me forward." Inch by inch, they moved, holding their breath whenever footsteps sounded above them. When they finally emerged on the other side, gasping for air, the veteran didn't allow rest. "Move," he whispered. "They'll check the area soon." The Admiral shook his head in disbelief as the veteran continued. Not long after escaping the checkpoint, A distant explosion shook the mountains. The second group had been spotted. The veteran knew they had seconds to act. He didn't think. He simply ran toward the ridge, motioning his men to follow. They found the second group pinned down by enemy fire. Without hesitation, the veteran positioned himself between the soldiers and the enemy line, directing return fire, identifying targets, and shouting commands with clarity. Several times bullets struck the rocks near his head, showering dust across his face. One hit his shoulder, but he kept fighting. The rescued soldier later said it felt like the veteran became a shield, refusing to fall, refusing to let anyone die under his watch. After several long, chaotic minutes, the team fought their way out and escaped into the thicker forest. But the enemy was pursuing them now, and the veteran knew they had to vanish, not fight. He led them into a maze of old mining tunnels hidden beneath the trees. Most of the men had no idea the tunnels existed, but Ghost 5 did. He had memorized the terrain during an old recon mission years earlier. Inside the mines, darkness swallowed everything. The cold air stung their lungs. But the veteran moved confidently, touching the walls, listening for echoes, guiding them through the labyrinth until dawn. When they finally emerged miles away from the enemy checkpoint, exhausted, wounded, and covered in dust, a helicopter awaited them. As the team boarded, the soldier he had trained hugged him tightly and said, "Ghost 5, you saved us. You always do." But the veteran only whispered, "We save each other." When the Admiral heard this, he felt a surge of respect so strong that his eyes softened. The veteran said that after that mission, he retired quietly, refusing medals or ceremonies. He didn't want applause. He only wanted peace. But peace, he said, is not something a soldier truly finds. It's something he learns to live within. The Admiral asked him one final question. "Do you ever regret your service?" The veteran lifted his gaze slowly, his voice calm but filled with undeniable truth. "No, sir. I regret the losses. I regret the faces I never saw again. But I never regret standing beside the men who trusted me. If they called for Ghost 5 today, even now I would go." And in that moment, everyone in the room understood that heroism wasn't in the stories told, but in the heart of the man sitting before them. The room remained silent long after the veteran finished speaking, and for a moment it felt as if everyone was still traveling through the dark tunnels, the blizzards, the battlefields he had described. The Admiral took a slow breath, absorbing the weight of what he had heard, then asked softly, "What happened after you retired? Men like you don't simply disappear." The old veteran looked down at his hands, hands that had carried wounded soldiers, held weapons, marked maps, and comforted dying friends. He said that when he retired, he moved to a quiet town far from the noise of bases and battlefields. He bought a small house near a lake, a place where mornings were peaceful, and the water reflected the sky like a mirror. He wanted a life where footsteps behind him were not threats, and where the sound of wind did not signal incoming danger. But adjusting to peace, he admitted, was far more difficult than any mission he had faced. He said waking up without orders, without responsibilities, without men depending on him felt unnatural. He didn't know how to be a civilian because every instinct he had was shaped by war. When he walked through grocery stores, he scanned exits automatically. When he sat in a cafe, he chose the corner seat with his back to the wall. When a car backfired, his muscles tensed as if expecting incoming fire. He laughed softly and said, "A soldier never really comes home. He just changes battlegrounds." The Admiral nodded, understanding more than he admitted. The veteran went on to say that one day, a young man knocked on his door. It was a soldier he had once trained, someone who had survived because of lessons passed down from Ghost 5. The young man said he had come not for advice, but to thank him. He told the veteran that during a dangerous operation overseas, when things went wrong and fear began to paralyze the team, he remembered something the veteran had said during training. Fear is not the enemy. Panic is. That sentence saved them. The veteran said that hearing this was the first time he realized he had shaped not just missions, but generations. Word spread quietly among former recruits, and soon others came to visit him, sharing stories of how they used his teachings to survive impossible situations. They brought their children, their wives, sometimes their medals. They told him he had changed their lives. At first, the veteran felt undeserving. He said he didn't save them, they saved each other. But the Admiral reminded him that leadership is measured not by medals, but by the lives touched. As the years passed, the veteran found himself mentoring young men in the community, not as soldiers, but as human beings. He taught them discipline, calmness under pressure, and responsibility. He became someone people trusted with their fears, their doubts, their confusion. He said he never talked about his missions unless it was to teach a lesson. He didn't want admiration. He wanted growth. One winter, a severe storm hit the town. Power lines collapsed, roads froze. Families were trapped inside their homes. While others panicked, the veteran moved silently from house to house, checking on neighbors, delivering firewood, helping the elderly. Someone asked how he stayed so calm. He replied, "This is nothing. I've walked through worse storms with men who depended on me." That night the townspeople said they saw him moving through the blizzard like a shadow, guiding lost children back home, clearing paths, ensuring no one froze. One neighbor later said, "He was like a ghost in the snow." The Admiral smiled slightly at the irony. The veteran continued, explaining that despite moments of peace, there were nights when memories overwhelmed him. He remembered voices of men calling his name, the sound of Harris falling behind during the first mission, the flash of explosions in the mountains, the freezing winds of winter operations. He said he sometimes woke up whispering, "Keep moving," as if guiding soldiers through danger again. But he learned to manage these memories by writing journals. Not stories of war, but reflections of what each experience taught him: perseverance, loyalty, sacrifice, trust, and the importance of humanity even in the darkest moments. One day, he received a letter from the family of Harris, the soldier lost during the first mission. They wrote that they had recently learned the full story of how Ghost 5 guided the remaining team and how he kept Harris's memory alive through his call sign. The veteran visited Harris's parents. They were old now, frail, but their eyes shone with pride when he spoke of their son's bravery. The veteran apologized for not bringing Harris home, but Harris's mother shook her head and said, "You carried him with you. That is enough." The Admiral felt his throat tighten at the story, but the veteran continued. He said that as his body aged, he visited military bases less frequently because it became difficult to walk long distances or stand for extended periods. Yet invitations continued to arrive, ceremonies, graduations, memorials, all asking him to attend, not to speak, but to be present. His presence inspired soldiers because Ghost 5 was not a myth. He was real, living proof of courage guided by humility. One day, a documentary team contacted him, wanting to feature his story. But he declined, saying the world had seen enough war stories. He didn't want fame. He wanted quiet. Then came the day when the Admiral, the very one sitting before him now, reached out, not for a documentary but for something else entirely. He told the veteran that today's soldiers, especially the younger generation, were growing up with screens instead of scars, simulations instead of real experience, confidence without adversity. The Admiral said they needed to hear from someone who had lived through what they only read about in textbooks. He wanted the veteran to speak to them, not as a hero, but as someone who understood the true weight of service. The veteran hesitated, wondering if he had the strength to stand before a crowd again. But then he saw the faces of young recruits during the visit to the base and realized that even one lesson from his life could save theirs. So he agreed. And that is why he stood in the hall earlier that day, not as a legend, not as a ghost from the past, but as a mentor passing down truth. The Admiral asked him if sharing his story today brought closure. The veteran shook his head softly and replied, "Closure isn't for men like me. We live with our memories. We honor them by helping others." Before the conversation could continue, a young Marine approached nervously and asked for permission to speak. The Admiral nodded. The Marine turned to the veteran and said quietly, "Sir, my father served under you. He said you were the reason he made it back home. He told me if I ever met you, I should salute you for him." The Marine saluted. The veteran slowly stood, though it clearly caused him discomfort, and returned the salute with the same strength he had carried in his youth. But what happened next silenced the entire room. The Marine said, "My father always told me your real name wasn't Ghost 5. He said your real name was Hope." The veteran froze, emotion flickering across his face for the first time. He asked softly, "He said that?" The Marine nodded. "He said in the darkest moments, you gave men hope when they had none." The old man's hands trembled lightly. And for a moment, the weight of all his years, all his missions, all his losses and victories, seemed to rest on his shoulders. The Admiral stepped closer and said, "You thought Ghost 5 was a burden. But to everyone who served with you, it was a lifeline." The veteran swallowed hard, his voice hushed as he said, "I never wanted to be a symbol." "You didn't choose it," the Admiral replied. "You earned it." The room filled with applause, not loud or chaotic, but deep, respectful, and filled with gratitude. The veteran lowered his head slightly, overwhelmed by the realization that his life, marked by sacrifice and silent courage, had changed countless others in ways he never imagined. Later that day, as he walked out of the hall with the support of his cane, the sun cast long shadows across the ground. Someone called out, "Ghost 5." He turned, smiled, and said, "Still here." And for the first time, he felt peace, not because he had forgotten the past, but because he finally understood his place in it. Ghost 5 was not just a call sign. It was a legacy, and it would live on long after he was gone. Asterisk.